At thy feet, in the palms of the beneath, hear our voices, we entreat. God defend our free land. God Pacific triple star, from the shouts of strife and war, make her praises heard afar. God defend New Zealand. Men of every creed and race, gather here before thy face, asking thee to bless this place. God defend our free land from dissension, envy, hate, and corruption. God, our state, make our country good and great. God defend New Zealand. The peace of war shall be our boast. The blood should flow, assail our coast. Make us then a mighty host. God defend our free land. Lord of battles, in thy might, put our enemies to flight. Let our cause be just and right. God defend New Zealand. Let our love for thee increase. May thy blessings never cease. Give us plenty, give us peace. God defend our free land from dishonor and from shame. God, our country's spotless name, crown her with immortal fame. God defend New Zealand.
Kia ora, kia ora, kia ora. We're on moko duty, but my darling's sleeping with our moko on the lift chair, one of those fancy lift chairs, and hopefully the moko won't wake up while I'm doing my life. But I thought we've had a busy morning, and you wouldn't think that a fridge breaking down would take up a lot of your time, but uh, it is an essential requirement, a fridge, and trying to get it here before we leave for New Plymouth has been near mission impossible. But anyway, it's on its way. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to travelling back to New Plymouth. But while I'm here, I thought I'd squeeze in another live while I can, because there are two issues when I travel to New Plymouth and stay at mum and dad's. One, they don't have internet there, and my phone, because we have a big maunga called Crown Hill, and it's quite big. My parents' whare is below it, and it blocks any connectivity with our phones as well. So I do have connectivity problems when I'm at mum and dad's. So I thought I'd make the most of this time and do another live. We are hoping or planning to travel down this afternoon. If not, it'll be tomorrow morning. But I want to play you another Russell Brand video. I mean, Neil Oliver, as I've stated, he's gone on to another platform. He is a historian, and I do enjoy his kōrero, but I do love, out of all the commentators around the world, I love Russell Brand, and he everything that he talks about, he references. So you can guarantee. I mean, you can go on and look for the reference. You can do your research, which is prudent thing to do. It's prudent to question. It's prudent to question your so-called elected members of parliament that are there to represent us, who, as we are aware, with the occupation in Wellington that they signed, there was no party in opposition. So they are going to pay the price. They will pay the price at the voting booth. Because here's the thing, National has proven, one, they're not in opposition, so they're the left and right wing of the same bird. That's Labour and ACT, right? They're not in opposition with Labour. They just tweak their policies, and actually they're very, very similar. They just come from different perspectives. And if we've seen corruption within Labour, then we've seen corruption all around the world. I mean, it's all been exposed. It's no conspiracy, whānau. There are a lot of facts out there to show that there is corruption within our governments. We've got to clean it up. We cannot keep on voting the same people in and expect something different, whānau. We've got to wake the F up to that, right? It gets a bit hoha for someone like me that sees a lot of things, and there's a lot of discernment that happens initially, and then you go out and then you do your research, do your due diligence, and that puku thing, that thing that upsets you, that makes you feel things aren't quite right. Like when my husband was attending his whānau tangihanga, whānau was saying something's not right. Their puku's telling them something's not right, but you got to go the next step. You've got to find out what's not right, and you got to start asking the questions, and you got to start challenging your leaders. Why is this happening? So we've seen excessive deaths. And excessive deaths means that they don't follow the trend from the previous years. So we're looking at over 3,000 excessive deaths in the last 2 years, since 2021, since the rollout of the vaccines. What you're seeing is when there's a rollout and there's an increase in vaccines, you'll see an increase in deaths and an increase of vaccine injuries. That's what the data is showing us. So anyway, I want to, they're calling it Roe v. Wade, right? Roe versus Wade, or the Roe case. I tend to just call it the Roe case. But anyway, Roe v. Wade is what the US are commonly calling it. Now, we just need to listen to this, because, what Russell says again makes absolute sense. But I'll let you listen to him, and I'll mute. Please let me know if you cannot hear him, and I'll have to tutu with my settings. I'll be back with you shortly. Enjoy Russell's video.
Has been reversed. How do you feel about abortion? Is what you feel about abortion important? Is the issue of abortion being used to create political tension? Let's find out. Hello there, you 5.7 million awakening wonders. Thank you for subscribing to this channel where we are committed to bringing you the truth as we understand it, even in complex situations like the one we're discussing today. If you haven't turned on the notification bell yet, turn on the notification bell right now. We make videos every single day, and I want you to see every last one of them as part of your journey towards awakening, and indeed ours, because you fuel us with the information that we need. Your expanding consciousness is the platform upon which we rest.
Reaction from both sides to the Supreme Court's landmark ruling overturning Roe v. Wade. Demonstrators gathering at the Supreme Court, those in favor of abortion rights, at times facing off against many celebrating the justice's decision.
One thing I can't help but thinking, isn't it strange that in this post-pandemic era, contentious issues that seem to be somewhat resolved or receding at least into the background of public life are once again emerging. These hot button emotional issues are flaring up at exactly the time that we're on a precipice of an economic crisis that neither party has any solution for, almost as if there's an unconscious consensus to get us involved in these difficult, complex, perhaps irresolvable issues.
Those protests spanning the entire country today, most of them peaceful, as 8 states already moved to make abortion illegal.
Now, the chances are you have strong opinions and feelings about abortion. I suppose any of us that are human have feelings and ideas around this contentious subject and lead us into all kinds of ideological territory to do with patriarchy, authority, bodily autonomy. Now, remember, where did you stand on the subject of bodily autonomy about 6 to 8 months ago? If you found yourself saying things like my body, my choice, even if it was in a kind of wry and ironic way, how do you feel about it now? And wherever you stand on this issue, are you willing to accept the other person's perspective? Are you willing to accept that there are perfectly reasonable people on both sides of the argument? And if even on hearing those words, you feel like, how can you say this, these people are, or how can you feel that, then I feel like you are possibly contributing to the escalation of the contentiousness around this issue. Whatever the solution to this complex problem is, it has to be achieved mutually and with respect and with a willingness to listen to other people. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see scenes like this.
Overnight, officers firing tear gas to break up a large crowd outside the Arizona State Capitol. And in Iowa, police launching an investigation after a truck hit protesters at an abortion rights rally in Cedar Rapids. One person taken to the hospital.
It's another one of those apocalyptic stories that we've experienced lately. It seems every time we look at the news, we are seeing the United States of America in particular being torn apart. Conflict, contradiction, hyperbole, hatred, wrath. There are a lot of people that I bet you lot follow that are like fervent polemicists that are outspoken on issues such as these. But the fact is if you think of a woman that you love, and if she, for whatever reason, wanted to have a termination, would you want to be the person that said no and prevented her? For myself, I would not put myself in that position. I would not be comfortable putting myself in that position. I do not think I have the right to be in that position. Perhaps you'd go, well, wouldn't you stop someone with a gun if they was a person and they're about to shoot a human being in the street? You know, I acknowledge there is complexity to it. And so I guess in situations that are complex, I reckon we have to find to a degree our own way. And what I believe perhaps above all else, and this is a tough one, guys, is that our spiritual principles are for ourselves. Like, I must work on my spirit. I don't go, right, I'm quite a spiritual person. Oi, what are you fucking doing over there? Like, for example, say you believe under no circumstances abortion. All right, cool. Under no circumstances have an abortion then. If you think a person should be able to have an abortion, then let people have, I mean, in a sense, decentralization around ideological issues such as this seems to be a kind of a fundamental idea. It seems like there are communities of people who absolutely do not want abortions. And I would say those communities of people, as long as everyone is voluntarily a member of that community, have the right to that determination. And there are other people who believe in the right for a person or a woman to choose. And I also believe that that is right as well. And I think that more important than anything else, that kind of nullifies this ongoing conflict, because wherever you stand in this debate, are you willing to accept that there are human principles that are higher than this, that are very much at stake right now? The idea of the United States of America is becoming somewhat implausible and unfeasible. And perhaps that's stitched into the history of your country, built upon a pre-existing nation, founded under slavery and divided by a war very early in your history. Perhaps it's just not possible. Perhaps the concept of one vast, ultra-powerful, 300 million person nation cannot be sustained. Why are we resisting it? There'll be some people watching this who think, oh, you're a man, you don't have a right to comment. And there'll be some people thinking, how can you, Russell, not stand up for the right of little, like, tiny embryonic life forms? And I think if you have a vehement opinion from either of those perspectives, then you are contributing to this, because obviously males are part of the regenerative process, and obviously it's not working to have such divisive camps, and clearly there needs to be some compromise around the nature of people's free will and rights and their bodily autonomy, subjects that we covered in considerable length when it came to the vaccine mandates. What I suppose I'm inviting us to consider, wherever we place ourselves on this ideological spectrum, is this is a difficult question, and it's a sad question. So when we're dealing with something difficult and sad, should we approach it compassionately or vitriolically, with sturm and drang and force and thunder, or with a delicate consideration and compassion that most people that have an abortion are probably doing it because it's a very difficult situation, even if it's what people would call in the discourse an elective abortion because of familial. That ain't no joke, to be in a family and feel like you've got too many children and you can't cope with your reality. And shall we accept that some people really believe that life is sacred and have deeply felt beliefs about it? Now, what I would say is this: if you believe life is sacred, then we must live as if all life is sacred. We must respect nature and one another. If we believe in the sanctity of life so deeply, then these are lives that you're dealing with. Your enemy, your opponent, they are lives. And if you believe in people's freedom and autonomy and their right to have termination because it's for whatever reason they want, then these people's opinions are there. They have the right to have an opinion. What we are all beholden to do is find a way of dealing with one another compassionately. And if that's too much for me to ask, or for us to ask of ourselves, then we're in a lot more trouble than even this one contentious issue suggests.
Many now looking to the court after the conservative justices ended constitutional protections for abortion. And Justice Clarence Thomas, in his concurring opinion, suggested the court might now rethink precedents set by other landmark rulings on gay marriage and contraception.
So to a degree, some of these issues are symbolic. They are the symbols of progressivism, and progressivism is our de facto cultural religion. We are broadly progressing technologically, medically, and presumably socially and economically. And people will tell you, Steven Pinker, etc., no matter how bad you think the world is, you're not a medieval peasant, or you're not a serf somewhere being trod on by a baron, and there's this idea that things are improving. But how valuable are these metrics in a situation of such ongoing tension? How can we hold on to the idea of progress when it seems to me that from an ideological perspective, progress would mean the ability to recognize that each individual to a degree lives in their own universe. And if we can't respect each other's universes, whether that's from a apparently right or apparently left wing or apparently traditional or apparently progressive perspective, then we are not understanding a key and fundamental component of reality.
And in Providence, Rhode Island, a police officer, a Republican running for state office, has now been charged with simple assault after he was seen allegedly punching his political opponent at a protest.
So I suppose where we are now is the pretense of congressional discourse, the pretense of a system where ideals are marked out against one another through conversation and debate. It's kind of falling apart. We're being forced to acknowledge that we are impulsive, emotional animals using symbolic issues to try to dominate, control, influence, and bias a culture. There are so many reasons why people might think I shouldn't comment on this. I'm not an American, I'm not female. But in a way, these are merely the visible signs of an ulterior problem that needs immediate address. what is this dysfunction? What tectonic plates are shifting to create all these fractures and fissures in our culture? Are we seeing the increased exacerbation of the conflict that rose out of the Trump and pre-Trump era and the 2008 crash that continues to be cultivated in our social media online spaces, these chambers of separate discourse? Are we ever going to address this? Are we ever going to try to approach these situations or the underlying situation demonstrated by this passion and intensity? Is this something we're ever going to approach differently, or are we just going to continue to double down in opposition? And what do you imagine the results of that will be?
Rachel Scott joining us now from the Supreme Court. And Rachel, recent polling seems to indicate this ruling overturning Roe v. Wade is at odds with where a majority of Americans stand.
But what I can tell you that many of the people gathered here today, along with Democrats, hope that this turns into a driving issue ahead of the midterm elections in November.
So, at a time when there's the lowest trust in politicians, lowest trust in our institutions, low voter turnout, a kind of disillusionment with the political class in general, these hot button contentious topics are rising to the forefront of consciousness. People suddenly aren't able to focus on what to do about the economy or ecology or how to tackle big businesses, how to tackle corrupt mainstream media. We're focusing instead on very emotionally charged issues, and I can't help but think that there is something deliberate, even if it's unconscious, about highlighting and framing issues around which it is very difficult to achieve consensus unless you are balanced and have good equilibrium. Isn't it interesting that at this time these issues are dominating the headlines? Since the US Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision legalized abortion nationwide in 1973, the issue has become one of the defining fault lines in US politics, with Democratic politicians firmly supporting abortion rights and Republican lawmakers lining up in opposition. In 1973, the lines were more blurred. Republican and Democratic voters were equally likely to say abortion should be legal, while it was easy to find Republican officials who supported abortion rights and Democrats who opposed the procedure. Republicans like First Lady Betty Ford said the Roe decision was a great decision, while some Democrats, like a newly elected senator named Joe Biden, said the court's ruling went too far. So historically, the issue was not so tribalized and was more delicately discussed and not divided along such a clear cultural or political line. Voters also did not see the issue along partisan lines. The General Social Survey opinion poll found in 1977 that 39% of Republicans said abortion should be allowed for any reason, compared to 35% of Democrats, so broadly the same. That's as recently as the 1970s. In the years that followed, conservative activists seized on the issue as a threat to traditional values and enlisted evangelical churches, which had shown a new interest in politics following a series of court rulings that limited prayer in public settings. So I suppose this is the emergence of the issue as symbolic. That means that it has heat beyond its practical application. In a 1983 Senate vote, 34 Republicans and 15 Democrats voted for a proposed constitutional amendment that would have overturned the Roe decision, while 19 Republicans and 31 Democrats voted against it. Biden was among those voting no, even though he'd backed the legislation in committee the previous year. Could he have been forgetful even then? Against. In the years that followed, the dividing lines became more apparent as political candidates found it increasingly necessary to align with activists who are becoming more influential within their parties. That's kind of like the gamification of politics, isn't it? It becomes strategic. It becomes more important to have demonstrative and symbolic issues that you can kind of coalesce and create ideologies around. That in itself prevents clarity, I would say. Republican George H.W. Bush, an abortion opponent who had earlier supported abortion rights, won the presidency in 1988. In 1992, he was defeated by Clinton, an abortion rights supporter who had earlier opposed abortion. Totemic figures in both the Democrat and Republican Party flipped their position. Even with this contentious issue, you could argue that both parties are ultimately the same. And perhaps you could contest that the reason that this disparity is emerging is precisely to create the idea of distinction when it comes to economics, the true power in American life and globalist life, they see the world in exactly the same way. Ultimately, they're going to get their funding in the same places. It's almost like it's an agreed upon playing field in which people can really hammer it out and cause division and celebrate entrenched difference. Meanwhile, Goldman Sachs, Pfizer, business as usual. Since 1989, abortion rights groups have donated $32 million to Democrats, while groups that oppose abortion have given $14 million to Republicans. Late as 1991, 45% of Democrats and 41% of Republicans said they supported abortion for any reason, according to a General Social Survey. Partisan differences widened in the following years, however, as the issue became a staple of TV attack ads, fundraising appeals, and mass rallies by interest groups. By the turn of the century, only 31% of Republicans supported on-demand abortion, while Democratic support remained steady at 45%, according to the General Social Survey. Biden, who supported a ban on federal funding for most abortions in the Medicaid program for the poor for most of his political career, reversed his position as he sought the Democratic presidential nomination in 2020. So it's possible that political expedience, certainly within the political community, determines what they say in public about the issue of abortion, particularly as, you know, if people can change their mind. That's fantastic. That's one thing we're all going to have to do if, even regarding this issue, we're going to come to some kind of consensus. Clearly, though, politicians are willing to use this issue for expedience. So you have to recognize, even if you have a very strong view on this subject, the possibility that you might be being played. Among Democratic voters, support for unrestricted abortion has jumped from 56% in 2016 to 71% last year, according to the General Social Survey, while Republican support continues to hover around 34%. So it seems that the political class in general benefit with issues such as, my guess would be, firearms and abortion, contentious, heated, even riotous conversation and debate, even conflict in the streets, I would contest is potentially beneficial for broadly static political groups that get their funding in the same places and, generally speaking, are ideologically aligned. Obviously, the subject of Roe versus Wade and abortion in general brings up very heightened emotions. Some people believe life is sacred. Some people believe that women have the right to choose and to have full bodily autonomy. What I think both sides of even a contentious issue like this can agree upon is that a time when people are apathetic and mistrustful of politicians approaching the midterm elections, an issue is being brought to the forefront that galvanizes voter interest. Sometimes I can't help but think we're being played by both sides, who in so many areas have absolute consensus around how the country should be run by the financial industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the mainstream media, that they bring to the forefront of our minds issues that are somewhat difficult for human beings to wrap their heads around and to extend tolerance and compassion to people on the other side of the debate. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up, share it around, speak to each other in the comments, try and be compassionate. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these. Sign up to my mailing list here. We tell you about live events, online calls, Zoom calls, all sorts of stuff that's too contentious and difficult to talk about here because of the nature of the world we live in. We talk about there. Sign up and stay free.
Gosh, isn't he really good talking about real complex issues? And you know, like he's got a team of people around him, team of researchers. He's got a great team. So I just want to summarize, and it's really important because both National and Labor brought up about the Roe case. And if you watched the Christopher Luxon, leader of National Party, you could say that his comments were political expediency, and you could say that we are being played by this major complex issue that's played out of the US, and it's about what does Russell say? It's about bringing contentious issues to the forefront, and he can't but help think that this is orchestrated, that all of this is orchestrated, because if that case didn't happen, you know, we'd be still looking at what's been happening in regards to the pandemic. So we just got to be cognizant of being played, right? Being played by the media, being played by politicians, and, you know, you've got entertainers that throw their 10-cent piece into the mix as well. So everybody's playing it up. But we got to question why create this dysfunction in our society? Why always creating disharmony and chaos? He also said that doesn't matter which side of the spectrum, and I guess it's also with what's been happening with the pandemic, whether you support the Roe case or not, we are part of creating that dysfunction and that by having that discourse and having that cordial and having those debates. I do like what he said about having respect, because like I said last night, the issue is so complex. I support the sanctity of life, and I believe that our politicians have lost their moral compass. I absolutely, hand on heart, believe that. And so I think that morality and tapu needs to be, from an indigenous perspective, we need to respect the tapu of people. We need to respect the tapu of our whenua. And it goes back to the issue about body autonomy, and how is it that these politicians can come out and say, the woman, her body, her choice, and yet when it came to putting a toxin, classed under our classed under the Pfizer safety data sheet itself, it's a hazard. So how come we weren't given the same respect? And yet these same very politicians that mandated us are saying, that woman, the flipping the argument. And we've got to be cognizant of this, whānau. It's talking with forked tongues. We're watching politicians talk with forked tongues. When they start talking with forked tongues, it's the time when people do not trust their politicians. Why? Because we've been lied to, we've been scammed, we've been deceived. And even those that I have debates with, I said, if we weren't being deceived, then this government would take notice of the data that's coming through MedSafe. Now, I talked about the 62,000 adverse events and over 3,000 serious adverse events causing serious injury to people, life-threatening injury, lifelong injuries. If this government was serious, that they would look at their own data, and they haven't. So we know we've been scammed. We know we've been scammed because they're not looking at their own data. Remember when I first looked at the data, I wrote a letter to the Ministry of Health, and I wrote a letter to the Disability and Health and Disability Commissioner, pleading that they investigate my father's injury and other people's injury, because we know that they've been vaccine injured. And they admitted, one, that there was going to be injuries, and two, there were going to be deaths, and that was it. That was it. They admitted, but they basically don't see it as an issue, because they see getting everyone vaccine as more important. So I just want to read something to you as well, whānau, which sort of sits along, I guess. We have to look at what COVID has caused, with our democracy, with our trust, the fact that politicians and the judiciary can create riotous situations, very complex situations, and we only have one side or the other. What I liked about Russell Brand is he said, let us just respect each other's decision, rather than going at each other. Let us respect each other's decision, and let us have that discussion moving forward. So I quite like that kōrero. He said, the fact that politicians, bureaucrats, and now the judiciary are escalating the consciousness, the issues within the public sphere, is concerning, because it's all about the timing. It's all about the timing of it, and it's the post-pandemic era, and it's used to get us involved in the situation. Disillusionment with our institutes. We know all across the world there is a lot of people are disillusioned. We know that our mental health has been impacted on. We know that suicide has increased over the last couple of years. And the question he's asked, is this deliberate? albeit unconscious. Anyway, food for thought. Another kōrero I just wanted to bring into our space, just for us to have a think about whānau, is the Dr. Hatchett, the new COVID democracy. Don't ask whatever you think, it isn't true unless I told you so. It was not a triumph of democracy as some people seem to think last week when the majority succeeded in imposing their views on a minority through the passing of restrictive legislation. Modern democracy is supposed to protect the rights of minorities and a plurality of opinion and options. And I guess one thing that Russell was saying is let's respect each other's whakaaro. But we have laws put in place to respect the rights of minorities and respect the rights of those that are vulnerable in our society. The main point of our opposition to vaccine mandates have been to protect our right to freely choose medical intervention. And I guess that's what the Roe versus Wade case has highlighted, your choice to choose, right? And we didn't have a choice to choose when we were mandated. This is not limited to COVID vaccination alone. The counter argument has been the compulsory COVID vaccination is an undisputed social good and therefore beneficial to all. I'll say that again. The counter argument has been that compulsory COVID vaccination is an undisputed social good and therefore beneficial to all. The risk of the mRNA inoculation can exceed the risk of COVID hospitalization. A French study just published in Nature shows just how vacuous meaning how empty, shows how vacuous this claim of universal good is. The study found an elevated risk for myo and pericarditis in the 7 days following mRNA vaccinations. Yes, governments are supposed to protect their population from risk, but equally important is the need for rational treatment and stratification of risk for different groups, genders, and ages. This has not happened in New Zealand. The claims of universal applicability, so universal application, and safety still being promoted in the media and by saturation, government advertising are without scientific merit. So basically what Dr. Hatchett is saying is that we've been pushed propaganda, there isn't proper science to support them, and they continue. And I've stated that there is a lot of data, a lot of science out there that actually challenges the safety of the Pfizer vaccination. And you know my story, and you know more and more of us are hearing these horrid stories. None of us, I ask people, have you heard of anyone dying from COVID, dying actually of COVID? And people have said no, they haven't, but they have heard of people dying not long after being inoculated and being injured. So there's a major issue, and the truth will eventually come to the surface. It will, because there's too many vaccine injured people, there's too many whānau that have buried loved ones after they've been vaccine injured and not long after they've been inoculated. So I'll carry on with this report. The key point here is that the government should not be seeking to impose ideology that is not fully supported by logic and evidence, scientific assessment and research on long-term outcomes. Limitation of choice through threat of punishment does not amount to a social good. Even if the universal health arguments were valid, which they are not, the imposition of views through threat or actuality of punishment necessarily ramps up social stress, which has all sorts of consequences for rates of mental illness, crime, and conflict. So, and if you want to get his full report, go to hatchet.com, hatchetreport.com. But yeah, it's just that I think it's important that we, it's important, whānau, that we look beyond the complex issues, that we start. It takes a bit of it comes quite easily for me because I'm very suspicious anyway, and I'm very cautious because there's a lack of trust. And when you've been oppressed for nearly 200 years, that can do it for you. And when stories are passed down to you where you've lost, your tupuna fought to try and retain their culture, try and retain their resources, and there was genocidal actions against your tupuna. That does put a mistrust with governments, and a healthy mistrust is at that. And I guess when it came to the occupation in Wellington, a lot more New Zealanders actually felt what it was like to be segregated, to be oppressed, to be treated as if you are a second-class citizen. And you've got to realise Māori are still treated in that way. In some cases, we're treated like third-class citizens or less than animals. And I've shared with you the stories that I've had along the way, and I've shared with you my experience about what happened to me and my papa whilst we were in hospital as well. Does that mean it's going to happen to you? No, it doesn't. But what I'm doing is I'm eluding you on what to do if you've got an elderly parent or a young child, or a tamaiti or a mokopuna that's going into hospital. You have to be absolutely vigilant. Our health system is breaking. Now, on the 1st of July, we do have a shift. We have a shift, and that's when the Māori Health Authority is going to come into play. And some commentators, some political commentators, are saying that it's going to even out the playing field with health outcomes. Now, I've experienced the negative end. My whānau's experienced the negative end of negative health outcomes. Our tupuna, we're always afraid, and I've told you about my husband. Their whānau do not like going to hospital because they say that you go to hospital, you don't come out. So going to hospital is like a step to the grave. I've seen and I've experienced with my father firsthand what managing someone's demise looks like. And unless you're aware of it, you're not going to know that it's happening, because the way that the words are used, words are powerful. And so when the doctors say, we can withhold his dialysis and let nature take its course, that's euthanasia. That's euthanasia. When a doctor says your father has the mana to decide, we empower people to have the mana to decide. So if he doesn't want to choose to continue on with his dialysis, then we will support that. That's to me for encouraging suicide. So, when you're in the moment and they're talking to you like that, you don't get it. Honestly, you're too busy trying to just do what you need to do just to keep your whānau members safe. But I knew my puku was telling me because I reacted to what they said about we as a whānau pulling Dad's dialysis. And when this young doctor spoke to me about my father having the mana to decide, I literally wanted to punch you in my head. physically, I was so upset. I said, oh my gosh, first you wanted to euthanize him, now you want him to commit suicide. But it was when I spoke to Papa Pim, because I thought it was all in my head, right? And you're under a lot of stress when you're dealing with a very sick whānau member. And it wasn't until I spoke to Papa Pim and we teased those out, and he affirmed what I'd already felt. And all I'm just saying, whānau, is kia tūpato. I haven't left it at that, and I'm not too sure what I'm going to do about that at the moment, because we're still fighting for him. We're still, he's still hanging in there. And whilst he has the will to live, we will hang in there with him. Just to also let you know, that our hearing on Friday has been postponed. Why? Because our judge has COVID. So our hearing won't be happening for another 2 weeks. I tell you, whānau, when you go into a court arena, it's like you're going into battle, right? And you've got to prepare yourself spiritually, culturally, and mentally. You've got to prepare yourself. And it's like, I've been doing this preparation for a little while. We worked bloody hard to get all our evidence together. Like, we had to get it done within, less than 2 weeks, about a week and a bit. We had to get it, because the judge gave us such a short time frame, and it was stressful. It was stressful on Kaumātua. It was stressful on all of us, and I just admire our lawyer. She was absolutely amazing, but we got it done. We probably could have did a bit more, because if we had a bit more time, we could have done a bit more. It just gives the other party a little bit more time to respond to us now, I guess. But anyway, it is what it is, and you get thrown these curlies in life, and you just got to move on and adapt. The key is to adapt really quickly and not get bogged down in the why and the whats and te mea. But kia ora to Anna. Thank you for tuning in. I'll just go and put up your comments. The dots are flung all over the place. That's probably why we struggle to join the dots. You're absolutely right. Well, it creates confusion, eh? It creates confusion and frustration. Christine says, yes, I agree. Respect one another. Kia ora taku whanaunga, Jill. Blatant hypocrisy, and still we refuse to connect the dots. Unbelievable. I know. Oh, I know. Well said. Thank you. So, whānau, it is important. Thank you for staying on. There's not a lot of us on today, so I'll try and wrap this up. But whilst I'm able to, I'm going to do my lives. Whilst I'm able to, I'm going to do my lives. So thank you all for tuning in. So, with the experiences that we experience within the health system, you wonder why Māori have pushed for a Māori health authority, because the outcomes, we have all billions of dollars pumped into the health system. Māori only see 2% of that budget, of those billions of dollars. When we only see 2%, then we're going to get minimal positive outcomes. So, even dealing with Dad and trying to set up, you have to go through the occupational therapist to set up home support. It was difficult, whānau. First of all, they said no, then I pushed it, and then they sort of opened the door a little bit, and then I pushed it again. And what I've found is that it's a limited resource, and so they are aware. Taranaki-based hospital are aware that they do not uphold their side of Te Tiriti, and Taranaki-based hospital is one of the reasons why we need a Māori health authority, because there is institutional racism. I don't care if it's conscious or unconscious. The outcome is still the same for Māori. So I did, when I was in the Māori Party, I did campaign on a Māori health authority, and so I absolutely do support having a Māori health authority, because our people die. Our people die because they don't get the access they're entitled to. They don't get the resources that they're entitled to. I went to the disability unit or organisation in New Plymouth, and they were amazing actually. And I spoke to the general manager, and the general manager said that it's quite common for people to come from the hospitals, more common now for Pākehā to come, but previously a lot of Māori used to come and say they weren't getting the resources. Now that the resources are tight, everything's tight, right? Māori are going to be pushed further out in regards to getting access. So I'm excited. Even though there's a lot of cynical people around about the Māori Health Authority, that we're creating a brown bureaucracy rather than a white bureaucracy, and tamir. The reality is that we weren't getting served. We weren't getting served under the current system, and it was costing us our lives. We were dying 10 years younger, and that's not good enough. We were treated like second class, now third class citizens, and that ain't good enough. So whānau, I just wanted to share a little bit of that. Okay, I think that's about all. That's about all I want to talk. I'm just reading through some other stuff, and it goes on a little bit. But I'm going to sign off now. Kia pai tō rā. Have an awesome day, and thank you for tuning in. Ka kite anō. Kia ora rā.